Yes, once more, welcome back to the Outcast Intellectual Podcast and its never-ending slew of awkward beginnings. This is the decidedly less awkward and also decidedly more jacked Jerrod Harlan, who is on top of just being awesome at lots of things, is a master of sarcastic humor.
Pretty
And
much the most jacked, sarcastic man on the face of this earth, from what I tell myself.
I mean, I haven't met another one yet, so you're still at the top of the leaderboards as far as I'm aware. But you're also really good at calling people out on bullshit, which is a characteristic I've always enjoyed of you as well. And we actually, not that we need to talk about the specific thing or instance that you mentioned before. Um, I'm down for talking about whatever, but you also tend to be a bit more tactful than me. So let me know if there's something that you don't want to talk about.
Let's put it this way. I'm fine to talk about my issues with things specific, the existence of specific sects within the marketing community and stuff like that. So like the beliefs of some people or the small groups that exist within. I don't want to talk about names or anything like that.
That's fine. Yeah, I don't really care about names either, so it all works out for me. But by the way,
or pinpoint any, or even reference any particular person in general, because at the end of the day, like obviously we've talked about this, or you've heard me talk about it a lot, both of those. Particular people that I have gripes with are really just single manifestations of the overarching issues that I have within this direct response marketing world. So it doesn't make sense to just talk about a particular person, even without naming them, because ultimately they're part of something, part of an issue, or what I find an issue of a much larger group of people.
Yeah, it's not really the person that you're necessarily taking issue with so much as just the manifestation of the larger thing itself.
Yeah. And just to preface all of this too,
sure.
I think it's important to say that even when I do talk about my issue with certain things, I'm not even necessarily throwing shade on someone in particular at the end of the day, because they may not have even thought of the alternate viewpoint of what they do, what they've done, what they're planning on doing.
Right.
Because when you get into this industry, there are just things that, even if you question them at first, there are so many people that think in a particular way because of some guru that they follow, and then the next guru that they follow. It's just, there's so much inundation of particular thoughts and particular beliefs that you almost can't blame people for just adopting those naturally, because humans' desire is to fit in within a community, right? It's their desire to succeed within a community and fit in based on, the evolution of humans.
Yeah, and it is interesting that, like, because this is something that I often end up kind of being at odds with a lot of people about, but probably this would be like the exception, is that when I look at things, I always think, okay, what makes the most sense about why this would be the case versus how do I feel about it and how do I explain that? Because those are two very different things. Like, for example, people's need to have a reason for everything does not mean that there needs to be a reason for everything. But people, they anthropomorphize the external world. So it's like, oh, this needs to have this, rather than just, no, I need to know why it's like that way. And I think that comes back to the social behavior and people putting on fronts, for example. I mean, burning through the veneer bullshit is, the name of the session. And this isn't even really exclusively about marketing, but I mean, when you're talking about bullshit, you gotta have to talk about marketing at some point because there is bullshit in it, just like a lot of other things. But one thing that we've kind of talked about before, and not
Before we
even
get into anything, I want to say one last thing, one last
hey,
disclaimer.
yeah,
I'm also not saying that I'm the most enlightened person on the face of this fucking earth or
no,
anything
I'm
like
saying
that,
it.
right? I want to make that very clear that I'm not like publicly shitting on all of these things that exist because I feel like I'm smarter than everyone else, or because I feel like, oh, look, I was able to see through this bullshit. Why aren't you? Like, that's not what it is. So I don't want anybody to misconstrue it as that. And this comes back to, again, me saying that it's not even me holding people at fault necessarily for things that I disagree with in this industry. It's just a product of the circumstances.
No, I'm just perfect, so it's okay. No, no, speaking of me being perfect, let me restart my video here because I was starting to look kind of blurry. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that is kind of once again, part of like how people are, which is that it can be really difficult to just have critique of something without people taking it as this or that. I mean, imagine if you had never learned how to take critique on your copy. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's something that I've noticed in marketing, but like with people in general, is that we learn all this stuff, right? But then it's almost like that's only utilized under certain circumstances. Like you even take, I mean, Dr. Phil, the marriage, therapist or whatever, got divorced. How hilarious is that? You know what I mean? Supposedly, he's a master of the mind, right? And he specializes in this thing. He should have been almost incapable of that, except in the real world where
Yeah.
stuff like that still happens, you know? And particularly in the world that we live in now, it's like you literally cannot point out any flaw in pretty much anything without somebody just getting batshit crazy about it and like, you know what I mean?
Oh, it's a constant thing of like, and it shows itself not even in as like extreme cases where somebody becomes mad that you've critiqued their copy,
Mm.
but even just defensiveness of, if I'm critiquing someone's copy, they're like, the natural instinct is to defend your thought process,
Mm.
right? It's like, hey, I feel like it should be this way over this way because of XYZ. Oh, well, my thought was, and it's like, it's fine. It doesn't necessarily matter. Like, it's good that you had a thought and a reasoning behind why you put it there, but you don't need to waste time defending it if you're, asking me for a critique or paying me for a critique or something. Don't waste your time defending it. It's unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
Like, just take it, move on. If you disagree with what I said, then disagree with it on your own terms and just don't change it.
Yeah, I think as a person who has gone out of his way to get as much critique as he can, which isn't to distinguish me from many other people who do the same thing that I do, who also have done the same thing. Uh, but I like to explain my thinking so that somebody who knows better, however you want to say it, can point out why not just this instance, but the thinking behind it may have been lacking. But I can understand how in many cases the person is just trying to explain away.
I think there's nuance in it. There's nuance in how you approach responding to a critique or criticism or whatever you want to call it. Um, Most people, the feeling that you get on the other side of the desk or the computer
Mm.
is very much a defense mechanism when they do that.
Yeah.
But you can, like, if you can be aware of like not doing it for everything, right? Because frankly, every little edit doesn't need an explanation.
Yeah.
Like every little thing that you write doesn't need an explanation behind why you wrote it. So when you're like editing it, it's not this make or break thing where it's like you need to explain every little thought process that went on behind every word. If the edit is something small, just like, hey, just restructure this sentence, it feels kind of clunky. Well, I wrote it because it's like, no, just fucking restructure it, right? Like,
yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I agree with you there.
But if there's something fundamental and it's like, hey, change, I don't think that this mechanism is good. I don't think that your proof here is good. Like, I think it is because of XYZ, then it could be a defense, right? Like it could be you just defending your ideas, or it could be like, well, let me present it from what I see, and maybe there is a common ground that we can come to, or maybe it does lead to better ideas. Because there's very much that situation, right? When you're writing with other people, when you're editing with other people, the back and forth is amazing, but there's nuance to how you do it. Right. And that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, because there's a huge difference between like somebody just trying to like protect their ego from all angles by, just aiming the shield this way and that way and that way. And like if someone is confused and saying, oh, well, I was trying to do this and evidently I completely failed at that. And then the critiquer is like, oh, yeah, so in that case, this is maybe a way that you could do that. So even if it's the person not even saying that they disagree with the critique, it's just a matter of being like, yeah, this is what I completely failed at before, I actually did it.
Yeah.
But I think, again, like that kind of even just comes back around to the notion of being able to take critique in the first place. Because like the whole point of like a veneer of bullshit, like I mentioned in the title, is that why people feel the need to have that front in the first place. And we come from an industry where many people who are sold into it are very much sold on the notion of you can be yourself and you don't need to answer to your boss anymore and this thing and that thing. And something that I've even kind of learned, getting not going to say coaching, but informal mentoring from you and other people is like, yeah, but like you still, you still can't just play by your own rules. You just don't have to wake up, at X time and then, whatever.
Yeah. You have far more leniency in how you act and what you do. But at the end of the day, everybody in this industry is still rightly looking out for themselves and their bank account, right? It is a career. It is a job, whatever. If you want to redefine job, that's fine. But like, it's still a career path. People aren't going to just automatically start acting, living in total harmony just because we're not in a fucking cubicle room, room of cubicles where we're all like vying for management position or some shit.
Yeah.
The fact is there are finite amount of clients. There are finite amount of clients. There are finite amount of jobs available. It is a shit ton of them, but it is still finite. And you are competing with people that are at your level for clients that are right for the people at your level. So you still have to have that attitude of professionalism and take yourself and this career path seriously. You can't, like you said, you can't just 100% be yourself.
Right.
In the sense of being yourself at all costs, right? Making enemies. As you ascend, as you get further, you can make more enemies, right? Because at the end of the day, clients just want you to have the skill to make them more money. And so it's why you see a lot of the big gurus are very, very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Outspoken?
Outspoken, yeah.
Candid.
Abrasive, I guess is the word. Abrasive.
Yeah,
Abrasive, to take that from Shane Hunter.
because they
Just,
can afford to be, essentially, right?
yeah, they can afford to be, right? They can make enemies, they can shit on people, they can call people out. It doesn't matter because they either have enough money, and at which point it doesn't matter to them.
Mm,
They truly have no one, like, they have their own product, right? So they're not beholden to anybody above them. They don't
mm,
have a client. They are their own client. So they can just act however they want. As long as they don't piss off the people that are buying their product, then they're fine.
right.
Or they're so fucking good, or they have such a long history of success that they can be really abrasive, and yet they can be late with deadlines. They can be a prima donna and still get clients because of their track record. But you don't start there.
Right.
When you start, you got to kiss ass. Like,
Or,
to
or at
some extent,
least
you
not,
just have to kiss ass.
yeah, or at least not spitting in a face, even if
Yeah.
you feel like it might be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to me how like there's always kind of that element of like rock stardom if you really think about it. Like it doesn't matter what the industry or profession or whatever. It's you get to a certain level and then things are fairer for some than it is for others. Or even just like who's talking to who about what and so on. And I almost wonder if that is part of the reason why so many people who get into marketing, for example, end up wanting to have their own offers because they don't want to have to play the game, so to speak. And if you don't agree,
My
you
my
know,
personal belief is that most people in this industry, at least right now, from the internet age, right? No, not even before this, because think of like some of the most successful direct mail packages, sales letters.
mm,
They were how to write your own letter to make millions of dollars, right? They were biz op by nature. And not only were they biz op, but they were copywriting biz op.
right,
People are sold into this industry by easy money and luxury lifestyle.
sure,
There are other ways to get into this industry, absolutely. But at the heart of it, everybody wants that. But if you get into it purely because of that, you're in for a rude awakening. Um, but I think the reason that most people want their own offer after spending 6 months being a copywriter is not because they don't want to play by other people's rules. It's because they see other people making a shit ton of money by being offer owners, and they talk about it, and they go on social media and they make TikToks and Instagram reels about it and all this stuff, but they never mention how fucking hard it is. It's the
yeah,
same reason why you think, like new copywriters think that A-list copywriters don't don't write bombs. It's because they don't ever talk about them. If you don't
no,
talk about them, apparently they don't exist.
yeah, it is
I
kind of
bet
funny.
I bat 1,000 when I hit the ball.
Yeah, it's true. Even when you just think of like, there's like a well-known like system out there that like when was working with another client, it seemed very similar to the other thing. And it didn't make me like have less respect for the system itself, but it just reminded me that when it comes to marketing, when it comes to pretty much anything that's been around for a long while, it's all just synthesized. Like nothing, none of it is completely original in any sense. It's just, even if you just think about like music, you have people playing some weird ass shit out there, but it's no weirder in theory than Schoenberg was, when he came out, he was doing all his weird stuff or prepared piano. And I mean, I'm probably losing the non-musicians here. But you know what I mean? it still is just it's cycles. Same thing with people like really liking like 50s culture, like around like the 2005 era or whatever, you know?
Yeah. No, and nothing being original is fine.
Right.
There's no issue inherently with that. The what I see the issue as in the marketing industry specifically is the grass is greener on the other side syndrome,
Mm,
right? Everybody has to make their product be the best thing fucking ever. Uh, Not that they have to make it that way, they have to market it that way,
right.
right? Because this industry is so fucking saturated with people who have their own copywriting communities, their own masterminds, their own whatever, their own mindset courses.
Yeah. I
We'll get
mean,
into mindset, but anyway,
yeah. Oh, you just need more mindset.
I just need more mindset, man.
It needs to be a hashtag. Just work on your mindset, bro.
So what happens is people end up just jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing because they realize that once they get into this thing, it's not exactly what it was marketed as. It is harder. It does
Yeah.
take time. I mean, there's just so much lying in this industry, skirting the truth, right? And everybody does it at the end of the day. We're literally paid to fuck around with the truth. I'm not above it. I'm not going to say I am. I'm not going to say, every single thing I write is 100% in alignment with what the objective truth is. Because at the end of the day, we all take studies that are, we take studies and manipulate them so that it looks better.
But it's from
Because
Harvard.
but like what looks better than, oh, well, the control lost 2 pounds and the variant, the group that was using this new powder lost 3 pounds. You don't say that. You say, oh, well, the group that used this powder lost 50% more weight.
Yeah.
So it's, fuck around with the truth. But everything is some degree of a lie.
Mm,
Every claim about every claim that I've seen. I'm sure there are people out there who have a marketing offer, who have a group, and they do market it like, hey, this shit is difficult. It might take you a fucking year and a half before you make any real amount of money doing this. It may. Realistically, other people have been doing this for years and not made over $1,000. They've been trying just as hard as you will try. Some people just get lucky with the right connection, with the right mentor, with the right referral. It might not be you,
apply
but
today.
anyway, pay me $1,000 a month to be in this group.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of the interesting kind of, I guess, like not balance, but I mean, even just thinking about it, because I also know that like you understand that bullshit in general is just kind of part of the human. I'm gonna say, well, not even really the human condition, but kind of like the social condition. Because I mean, the whole point of having like that veneer and having that front is because you need it to smooth things out. Because if you point out, it's like, look, you're a fucking idiot. I've shown you this thing 3 times and you still haven't figured it out. Then it's going to kind of mess with the relationships, right? Which is why people phrase things as a given way. It's like, well, have you tried doing this way? You fucking idiot. It's like, not that people are necessarily thinking that, but to examine the fake nature of it, but then also like the genuine side of it as well. I guess how, even just like philosophically, like how do you kind of approach keeping those two things in balance? Because I also have experienced just how fucking annoyed you can be when someone is just saying, it's like, oh, just this, bro. It's like, oh, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um,
And it doesn't have to be strictly marketing related. I don't do a marketing podcast. I do a thinking podcast.
I just really question everything, right? Like I don't believe things that people say. I don't
Hmm.
believe what marketers say. Uh, I don't I don't believe what most people in my daily life say because and you can find this on Instagram, Facebook, whatever.
Right.
Everybody portrays the best version of their life humanly possible. You know, go on, look up like the people who live in RVs, right? And their Instagram feed looks like, wow, they're living the fucking dream. But they sort of just gloss over the fact that, oh, they haven't taken a shower in 7 days. Maybe they haven't eaten that much over like there's a whole bunch of things that fester under the surface.
Hmm.
Somebody with a beautiful house and a nice car, and then it's like, oh, well, yeah, they're also $200,000 in debt, and that doesn't include the house.
Yeah. Or even
So everybody has an incentive to portray their life in the best light possible for nothing more. There are tons of reasons why, but the reason why your neighbor does it is because they gain status, right? If they show how awesome their life is without revealing all of the shit that goes on underneath of that, then you look at them and you're like, wow, man, you have an awesome life. I wish I could have your life. And they get, you know, satisfaction points for that.
uh,
We're incentivized by very dumb shit as humans.
yeah, even just like spending 20 minutes writing out the perfect like YouTube or Facebook comment just to show someone just how stupid they are when you know from years of experience they're not going to listen. Like they're just going to, come back. They're going to spend the same amount of time coming back to you, or they're going to spend 15 seconds and not even, pay attention to what like the well thought out points you made. It's like, yeah, whatever, don't feed the trolls or something like that. And now you just jerked off for the last 20 minutes just to feel better about something where it's not even going to actually do what you want.
Yeah, you're not accomplishing anything. I and everybody's guilty of this. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. You have to consciously remind yourself to be open about the things that you might not want to be open about
Hmm.
because it is so ingrained in human nature to not be open about that stuff. Uh, that you're not always going to be like, you might present a win, but you're not a bad person for not just automatically thinking, oh, by the way, I had this win. Let me also share the 5 losses that I had this week.
Right.
That doesn't make you a bad person, just makes you a regular human. Um, but it's like I try to bring up that shit. I try to talk about that stuff when it comes up, when it's necessary, to add the context necessary to make somebody recognize that they're doing good, right? I remember having a conversation with somebody who she was like 6 months into copywriting, and we were talking and she was like, oh, I feel so behind everyone. I'm like, what are you making? And she told me what she was making, on average per month. I was like, what? Why do you feel behind? You're doing fucking awesome. She's like, well, compared to everyone else. I'm like, everyone else is fucking lying. They're fucking lying.
Yeah. Or if they're not lying, somebody else lied about it and they
Yeah. There's so much missing context behind what you say. And again, not always on purpose. There's just way more context necessary to get a full picture of someone's life, someone's business, someone's day to day. It's very easy to go on Facebook and see someone post like, hey, I wrote this sales letter that made $2 million in 4 weeks. And you're like, shit, they've been a copywriter for less time than I have. What the fuck? Do I suck? Should I quit? But it's very hard to stop and ask yourself, well, wait a second. What are all the nuances behind that? Was it a big company where they had like a 3 million person list? In which case, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it makes sense that your promo made $2 million. You sent it out 7 days in a row to a huge fucking list. Right. Or what was their, their ad spend? The offer might have just been amazing, at which case, like, even subpar copy could work really, really well, because copy is it's not that big of a thing in terms of the offer. Good copy is necessary when you sell a shit product. When you have a really good product that people want, you could fucking write anything on a page and people will buy it because they want that offer. Yeah, you can talk people out of an offer and all of that shit. But like, to be reductionist, if you have a good thing that people want, you almost can't keep them away from it. Now, why do supplement companies that sell bullshit weight loss shit, why do they need the 80-page sales letter written by a fucking A-lister? Because their supplements fucking garbage.
Or because they have the same as whoever else is out there.
It's the same white label bullshit as 17 million other companies that are trying to start a supplement company. So they have to have amazing copy. They have to use the horror story to try and trip someone's emotional switch. They have to use all that. But it's like, when you see products that are good, have a fucking a hybrid e-com page that does amazing and that they work really well. Because again, people want to buy shit. I don't like this whole like, oh no. Okay, sorry. I was going to go and I was wrong. I was mixing something up. But people love to buy shit. Everyone does. If you have a product that people want to buy, you don't need that much to get them to buy it. Maybe just a little bit of proof, a little bit of talking about what it does. You don't need 80 fucking pages, 15,000 words.
Otherwise, you just get it in front of their face and they'll click through anyway, because it's like, oh yeah, I was looking for something like this, since whenever.
Yeah. But there's also, there is also the factor of, there's a lot of behind the scenes economics. And so it's like, how do you maximize the amount so that you can have the money to have the ad spend necessary to get in front of people? So again, just to be clear, I'm being very reductionist here. But I believe at the end of the day, if you have a good product that has a market match with what people want, you don't need all the bullshit.
So then I guess, particularly considering how we're even more encouraged to gas up the wins and downplay the losses if they're mentioned at all, why do you think that, not even just in an industry, but in a culture, world, whatever, where most stuff is like that, why do you think people tend to gravitate towards actually authentic people so much? And I don't mean people making the vulnerability posts or this thing like, oh, look, I'm a human too. No, fuck you. Like, I hate that stuff because that's just more of the same thing. It's the hero story. I mean, like, the real thing, like I fucked this up. Like, there's no there's no CTA at the end. There's no, oh, but look how inspiring I am. It's just like, no, like, I fucked this up. I'm still doing whatever. Understand that you can fuck up this badly and still be perfectly fine. Like, why do you think people resonate with that? I'm also going to adjust my webcam because I've been looking like left this entire time. So yeah.
I'm looking back and forth too. because there's such a saturation of people who look perfect, and we internally know ourselves are not perfect. Everyone, even if it's just subconsciously, right? Unless you're a fucking narcissist, then you are perfect. You are perfect in your own world. And hey, I'm sure if we had a psychotherapist come into this industry and evaluate every single person in it, there would be a metric fuck ton of narcissists.
Yeah.
Diagnosable narcissists. But past that, we all know that, like, we fuck things up.
Mm.
Even if your only inclination of that is cognitive dissonance, right? And so it's like seeing people just being truthful, you gravitate towards them because you feel like them. It's, you know, that if you hang around them, if you talk to them or whatever, you're not going to walk away from that conversation feeling like shit about your own life, because you can share in the problems that exist. But who wants to talk to somebody who's fucking perfect? It's annoying.
That's why Superman isn't as good of a hero as like Batman or something like that. Because it's like, oh, he's like, he has all this power. He needs to decide what to do with it. It's like, yeah, but
there are no stakes. There are no stakes when you're undefeatable. Right? Again, I think that's why people do, in your example, and I'm not like a big superhero person.
Neither am I, but you know, it's a well-known example.
Yeah, I think that people do gravitate towards the flawed or able to be killed superheroes because there's no fucking stakes. That's why they have to give Superman the kryptonite thing.
Right.
If Superman didn't have kryptonite, why are you going to go watch the movie? It's going to be boring as fuck because he can't die.
Right. Literally has to either be him on another Kryptonian or it has to be him against Kryptonite. And otherwise, it's like the same thing. And that is admittedly where my knowledge of comic books ends too.
Yeah,
so yeah, don't worry about it being like super comic booky. But even like I wasn't super aware of it, but like when, you know, during the initial like Avengers craze, like so many girls had it going for Loki, which I think is still the same case. And I remember reading an article on it. It was like, it wasn't because he was like this vet, it was because he was flawed. And that was the interesting thing to me was that like this guy like literally just keeps fucking up. If you really think about it, like he acts like he's so smart, he does all these clever things, but he always just gets his ass kicked at the end of the day. And that, I mean, that says something kind of tragic about people's self-esteem if they self-identify with this code who just fucks up all the time. But that is an element of kind of like that self-reflection, I guess, like what you were mentioning before, that I think you kind of, it's interesting how people's interests, and like I always say, like how you do anything is how you do everything. And even if people don't realize it, even where their interest goes reveals the kind of person that they are. And so, for example, like I remember like when I was first starting to get to know you, and you basically just kind of summarize like why you would like give so much advice or refer me to this or whatever. It's like you like to see good people win, which is kind of like hilariously sentimental when you consider how we can be, like how much of realists we both are. That it's like, yeah, like we understand that if a big meteor came by and just smashed into this planet, there would be no spiritual like wailing across the entire cosmos. It would just be one revolving ball, sphere, whatever, that just wasn't spinning anymore. And yet at the same time, we have that sense of like a moral center where it's like, no, like I don't want to see shitty people being the only ones who win. And so, you know, it's kind of interesting I don't know if it's juxtaposition, but you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to say, right? Because it's like this comes into the question of where do morals come from, right? You obviously
right,
have religious people say that they come from the religion that they happen to believe in.
right,
Uh, but then also there is some subjectiveness because you look at other cultures or older, ancient cultures that like I was just learning about how the Aztecs would burn people alive and then take their brain out. They would burn them alive in order to induce a state of panic. And at that time, they would take their brain out because of all the hormones that were rushing, and then they would eat their brain to get like an insane hormone trip, basically. And
that's
it's
fucked
like,
up.
I'd love to believe, yeah, I'd love to believe that there was some objective nature of good or right and wrong, but I don't know. I don't know if there is. Uh, but I think in any given time period, right, in any given culture within any given time period, there's a pseudo objective nature of right and wrong.
Hmm.
So maybe it's not based to the human level of like we're born and we know right and wrong. But just like coming into the marketing field where you have to fit in to some degree,
Hmm.
uh, there is a lot of pressure culturally on what is right and wrong. Um, some of it misguided in terms of like some of it misguided in the sense of like go back 50 years and like you have the religious leaders demonizing just natural human shit as
Right.
fucking masturbation or whatever
Yeah.
as like wrong. It's like, yeah, it's not wrong. So again, I don't want to say that there's any objective right and wrong, but if you just zoom out, there is a sort of right and wrong that is sort of held by the majority of people within any given culture at any given time.
Right.
And it changes. But like, frankly, who gives a shit about what's going to be right and wrong in 300 years? It's like, I'm not going to be around in 300 years. I care about what culture is doing right now.
Right. I mean, a few hundred years ago, whenever they had a palace or a party at Versailles, I remember when I took I forget what the name of the class was, but it's like a Western history class in college, and the that professor was amazing. Like I almost took a class in something that I didn't give a shit about simply because he was the one teaching it. Because like he pointed out that like at Versailles, it's like when there was a party, the nobles would show up, and there would be a booth of men, there'd be a booth of women, and there'd be a booth of children because whatever floats your boat, right? And back then they really didn't give a shit where that stuff was concerned, and
Yeah.
so what is what's right, what's wrong, where does this end, where does that begin, and such. That's why I'm personally like very existential, because I in existential in the sense of like we each create our own meaning in that sense, because I'm not usually a very mathematical person, but when it comes to something like that, I'm thinking, okay, well, for something to be objective, it needs to be replicable, right? It needs to be provable. You need to be able to say why, even if it's something that's very like faith based or something like that. And when it comes to proving something as right, where's the zero? Like, where is the point where it ends and the negative version of it begins? And people can think they prove that all they want, but they don't. And so you have, oh, like, well, this is wrong because everybody feels that way. What about people that you call sociopaths? What about somebody who's angry that like their brother just got killed or whatever else? Like at what point does this unthinkable thing that everybody agrees is horrible become like, well, yeah, of course they did that. How can they not? You know? But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's just interesting to me that that you and I, as people who are not just aware and not just critical thinkers, but also aware and critical of our own thinking in the sense of like calling ourselves out on bullshit, that we still have that strong moral center, which you could almost say is just kind of like a natural expression of how we are rather than just like indoctrination in that case. And yeah, I just find that interesting where it's like when you have realism mixing with what's in a certain sense idealism, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't be helping people based on, I mean, yeah, they have to be competent because you don't want to look like a fucking idiot for by by advocating for somebody, but based on their personal character, they're it's just interesting to me how that lines up.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sense to me. So don't get me wrong. I think that there's definitely a play. Like I was religious growing up,
Mm,
right? And no matter what, that's in your head throughout your entire life.
like your upbringing.
So, I mean, I didn't have like parents that were over the top with it and like made me go to church, multiple times a week and like homeschooled me to shelter me from the outside world and all that stuff.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's like you can be as anti-religious as you want. There are still good things that are taught
Right.
in any, in any religion, really. And so that definitely plays no matter how much I wanted to separate myself from it when I was, an angsty 18-year-old. Uh, but now I think like my moral compass comes from the fact that I don't care what people do as long as they're not taking away the right of someone else.
Mm,
And I mean a real right, not a pseudo right of like, oh, healthcare is a right. Healthcare is not a fucking right. uh, Being able to take care of your own body is a right. Like you have
mm,
the right to take care of your own body in whatever way you see fit, but
right.
you don't have a right to someone else's time and labor. You don't have a right to take up your doctor's labor for free.
Right.
So, but real rights, right? And so to me, in the marketing industry specifically, the reason that I want to see good people win is not just so that bad people fail, but because bad people take advantage of innocent people.
Mm,
They lie and use manipulation and whatever. Yeah, they're not holding a gun to their head. And yes, I wish that regular everyday people did more to like critical think about shit, but they have their own fucking lives going on.
right.
They have their 40-hour a week office job and then they come home to kids and they come home to debt and they come home to, whatever, a partner that's nagging them and they come home to, they have their own lives. I'm not expecting everybody to be super fucking researched on every fucking topic that they make a decision on in their lives.
Right.
So I want good people to win because I know that good people will be stewards of not unknowing people is like, oh, I'm so much smarter than them, but like people who have enough shit going on that they can't take 20 hours out of their life to do in-depth research on some topic on something that they're interested in buying. I know that good people are going to be stewards, and I know that bad people are going to be manipulative. And so which one do I want to succeed?
Right. Yeah, and even just the notion of taking that personal like responsibility for it is something that, again, when it comes coming back to kind of like the veneer thing, like the front that people put on is very much like you can see the difference between someone like they're doing something because they need you to see them this way, the prestige that you were talking about, versus the person even just who just wants that car, for example. Like you could want something that's like really glamorous because you really like it. I don't have 50
Yeah.
colognes because I want girls to think I smell good. I have 50 colognes because, well, because somebody gave me a really good deal on them. But the point being is that they like, I just like the way that they smell. Like I like being able to open the thing and be like, what do I want to smell like? Like the experience of it. And I think that it's like it's almost like people are afraid to show like this is why I'm like this. This is what I like because they don't have the like the self-esteem to be willing to be not liked. You know what I mean? They at the end of the day, they may say, oh, like, well, I don't care what anybody says, because that's what like everybody says these days. And yet everybody pretty much cares so much more of what everybody says, even than in the past.
It's very easy to tell. Like, I don't like the adage, oh, if you have to say it, you aren't it.
Mm,
Because, whatever. You can say something and it's not like a lie.
right,
Like, what really determines it for me is just, do you behave in accordance with what you say? I don't, just because you say, like, oh, I don't care what anybody thinks about me, it doesn't make me automatically assume you're full of shit.
right,
But if you don't do anything that raises, ruffles feathers, or you don't do anything that goes against the grain, then you're full of shit. You're deluding yourself into thinking that you don't care what people think about you.
right. Or even if you feel the need to always ruffle feathers, that also says something about you, because there's a huge difference between somebody who, like, you say something's like, well, that's not very nice, then go the fuck over there. I'm not saying it to like so you can like approve of it, versus, oh, I know this person's religious, so I'm gonna like start saying, oh, like religion's a sham and all this other stuff. It's like uh, our buddy Lauren, not penniless. I was saying penniless, but I guess it's penniless. We talked for like 2.5 hours the other week about religion, something that I still do not have like in general like the greatest of respect for. Like you said, like you can't just have like this one perspective on it, because there are positives to it as well. But the fact of the matter is that he and I talked about it in a very respectful manner. And there are so many people out there who is just like, no, it's just a sham. It's just, the Crusades killed people and it put down like homosexuals. Like, yeah, that is true. There are also a bunch of like homosexuals that try to make people feel guilty for not being attracted to the same sex. Like you can cherry pick whatever quality of anything you want from anything. That's the reason I always hated research papers when I was in college. Is just like, oh look, I found evidence that I'm right. Oh look, you did the same. Like you can
Yeah.
find a Harvard research study for whatever the fuck you want.
I will talk about one person here because you brought Lauren up, and I will say that Lauren is quite possibly my favorite human being in the marketing industry, because that man, he lives what he preaches. True, like truly.
No.
I have never met someone who is less judgmental. Like, no matter what you say to him, obviously he's religious. No matter what you say to him, he just loves you.
Yeah.
And like every time I hang out with him, I'm just like, shit, I want to be as good a person as he is. Like, he truthfully is, I don't think I've even ever told him this, but like he truthfully is, I have nothing but insane amounts of respect and love for Lauren.
Yeah. I, no matter how modest he tries to be, I don't think I've ever met anybody who feels any differently.
Yeah.
He's just that guy.
Yeah.
He is that guy. Whenever like I mention him to somebody who doesn't know him, it's like, oh, like who's that? It's like, like that, like the kind of Christian that like people pretend like they're being. He's that guy.
He is that person. Yes.
Yeah. And he is so much that person that as soon as you mention, it's like, nah, I just do what I can, you
Yeah.
know. But not even in like the lacking of self-esteem kind of thing, because there are a lot of people who are like that. It's just like, no, that's just the way he is, and he doesn't feel the need. Ironically, spending so much time talking about veneers and stuff like that, that is somebody who just radiates so much goodness that you just like,
Yep.
wow.
And not once has he ever said it. He doesn't say
Right.
like, "Oh, I'm such a good person. I don't judge anyone." He just fucking lives it, and you know it. And if you spend any time around him, like you know,
Yeah. It's it really is crazy to me to just think about things like there's so many different elements of like how people function like in the society that they live in, and and even when you just take into account how different things affect other things, but then you just see this kind of aberration of all these like supposed like all encompassing rules, and it's just like, but then there's him, you know.
yeah.
So
It's funny because like I'm not religious,
neither am I.
but my favorite people in my life are all religious.
Oh shit, well fuck you too then. No,
No, I mean
it's
like
a
the
good
people
point.
like, and I don't mean that as a slight to anyone.
Right.
Like the people that I look up to the most are all religious.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's something for it. Obviously, there's a whole insane amount of bullshit within religion and whatever, but like I think it means something that I have naturally gravitated towards the fact that the people that I just aspire to be like the most are all religious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything else where like the degree of intensity of an idea that something represents also tends to attract people of similar intensities, if not similar purity of intent necessarily. And so that's why you have like religion that was basically just used as an excuse for why you just need to let me conquer and rule you, and you get have to just starve for like your entire life, but don't worry, you'll be rewarded after the fact. And then you have Lauren. You know what I mean? Like there's just such a huge spectrum of all that. And when it comes to like even nationalism, like I for me it's hard to like really grasp, simply because it's like, okay, but like it's a geographical area. But then at the same time, like you just have like people who, they storm the beaches and all this other stuff, compared to the other person who's just like, oh, about in America, and then they were just like screw the Middle East. So
Yeah.
yeah, not to ramble, but it is interesting how it works.
I mean, I understand nationalism. Like it's just a culture thing. I think more of what nationalism, let's just use an example.
Sure.
So I'm not like tripping over words here. You think of nationalism, right? You think of pretty much one particular part of the United States, right?
Mm.
Pretty much the South. And again, going to be reductionist and generalist here, but that's what you typically think of.
Right.
And I don't think that they're nationalist in the sense of America. They say America, but what I think they really mean is their own individual area within the United States, their own culture within the United States.
Mm.
And they just place the title America on it. Right.
No.
So, but cultures have been doing that forever.
Right. Me versus them, or us versus them for.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be an us versus them. It can just be like, hey, look, I'm from here. I associate with the people that are also from here because we have similar culture. And I just inherently believe that this culture is the best because I'm happy and we all seem to be happy.
Mm.
So I don't think it always is a negative thing of like, look how terrible all those other people are. I think I genuinely believe most people are good.
Mm.
I genuinely believe most people are good and that they don't have negative intentions for anyone else necessarily, unless they feel like those other people are coming onto their turf.
Okay.
Now, obviously, you can use examples of like, well, The fucking tribes, they would go and slaughter the tribes next to them. Yes, but with more knowledge, humans are progressing in terms of like what we believe, right? We don't feel like that anymore. But we still have the natural tendency to identify with our close quarters. I talk about it from the Northeast. I love the Northeast. When I moved away from the Northeast, I wanted to come back because I love the general attitude of people here. And I don't get that attitude anywhere else in the country. And it's what I grew up with. Do I think it's better? No, I think it's better for me. But am I a nationalist? Like, by definition, sure, in some capacity of like, hey, I really like where I'm from. I'd really not like to have other cultures come in and destroy what we have. Imagine being a Southerner right now, where everything that you hold, and whether you disagree or agree, does not matter.
Right. No, I'm
put yourself in the shoes of everything that you grew up with, and now you have fucking politicians in California or Washington, D.C. telling you the right way for your local, for your area, for your part of the country, for your state, for your town. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Even just the notion of like, I remember when they were tearing down like all the Confederate statues and stuff like that. And even just like the notion of like the Confederate flag and people saying, oh, like it's racist, this is racist, that's racist. And I could see, while I don't agree with, I could see the argument for the statues in terms of where their perspective was. It is well established that the Confederate flag is like a Southern pride thing. It's like like the stars that you see all over barns in New York and probably Philadelphia too. Yeah, I mean, when it's, well, not Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania rather. It's not about racism or slaves or this or that until somebody makes it be about that. And that is kind of the unfortunate element of, is like nothing is sacred, like literally nothing.
Yeah. At the height of the slave trade, I think it was 2% of America owned slaves, which is
Wow. I
it
never.
was a very, very small number. In fact, only 5% of the entire slave trade came to North America. Most of the slave trade was in Africa or South America, actually. I think obviously Europe too, but only 5% came to North America. We are not alone in the fact that we have a race, like a slavery past. Every culture throughout human history has been enslaved by another culture. No. It's not uniquely inherent to Africans. And so my question is, like, the way that I think about, the war and like the whole Confederate issue and the Confederate generals is it a cartoon version of history to assume that everybody who fought for the South was in favor of slavery when there were only 2% of people who owned slaves? Like, did that many people care so much that they were willing to die in battle for it? I just can't see it.
No. Yeah.
To me, but if you look at what actually happened, Abraham Lincoln, if you read anything, like any actual detail about Abraham Lincoln, that dude was a fucking asshole. He did not give a shit about the slaves. In fact, he openly wrote that if he could preserve the Union without freeing a single slave, he would. That was his own writing, right, almost verbatim. And what he did was he incited the war. Like, he literally sent Union troops down into southern cities to destroy them in the middle of the nights. Do you think that will incite a community to go to war with you?
Probably.
So was it really about slavery? Were random everyday people in the South so pissed off that they couldn't own a slave potentially that they decided that they were going to risk their lives for it? I just don't see it.
It is hilarious when you actually like say the rationale out loud rather than, I mean, same thing with freedom. Why have we been fighting wars in the Middle East for the last 20 years? Freedom.
Yeah.
The war on terror. It's, why did Hitler's Nazis come to power? Because they were evil and manipulative. Like none of this, never mind the fact that we, conveniently ended up fighting in a country that is predominantly valued for oil, something that, every modern nation is still kind of obsessed with. Never mind the fact that Germany was completely fucked over after World War One and made to take responsibility for war, that they were just the allies of the real nations that started it, and so on and so on. No, these people are just bad, and we're just the good guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, are you really that shocked that the Middle East wanted to attack us when for decades we've been fucking around in their affairs?
Right.
So, it's just everybody
But there
wants
would,
to have such a cartoonish version of everything because it's easier to handle, right? It's easier to have a black or white view on something when it's so cartoonish that the black or white, right or wrong is easy to decide.
easy to digest.
Yeah. So that said, I'm going to have to hop
All good. Yeah.
because it is
I knew
11.
that I knew that 11 was around the time when you just start getting on your stuff anyway. But yeah, appreciate you making the time to come by and shoot the shit and whatnot.
Absolutely. Were any Facebook comments or anything?
Uh, Robert, our favorite, you know which Robert. When you're saying that you're probably the most jacked, sarcastic person around, no, he's not. So like literally, he was like right on top of it. Oh, and Andrew Tennant just hopped in too. So yeah, sorry, dude. We're just wrapping it up here, but yeah, it was a cool talk, and would be cool to, well, we'll talk again, but it would be
Yeah.
cool to talk to you on here again sometime too.
I'm happy to come on and bullshit on mindset at some point.
Oh
Since we
man,
never talked about it.
we'll pencil it in. We'll pencil it into the calendar.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool. Take care, man.
Have a good one.